Alright guys, today I have a request. So I have a subscriber that wants to upgrade to the A56 coming from an S10 Plus and wants to know should he make this upgrade or, save up a little bit more and, get something else, maybe an S24 FE or maybe an older flagship. And I know some of you guys, you may not want to buy the used refurbished marketplace, but my first recommendation would be, to go with the older flagship. But if you do not want to do that, you want to save up a little bit, go with something else. Let's go ahead and see if this is worth the upgrade. The A56 is actually, kind of cheap now. On Amazon, you can find these for around 300 plus, the lower 300. So the price has come down on these quite a bit, and it's actually a pretty good phone. I actually like this mid-ranger this year. Besides the fact that they took the SD card support out, which makes no sense. But let's go ahead and get into it. So coming from the S10 Plus, the S10 Plus is, an older flagship, fully premium device. It is going to be a little bit smaller in terms of, thickness and height. But the A56 is still pretty comfortable to hold. As you guys can see, you have a pretty different take, Samsung's design evolution on the cameras. These bigger cameras will allow for you to have a little bit better low light photography. So shots like indoors where there's not a lot of light, you should be able to see a difference for sure. But as far as the build quality goes, the S10 still, looks nice compared to the A56. But yeah, there's not a big upgrade here in the build quality. And honestly, there is a kind of a downgrade in IP certification. You have IP68 versus IP67. So yeah, that's pretty much it as far as the hardware, guys. They both have that glossy finish on the back as well too. Guys, don't forget you also will be losing the headphone jack and the SD card support that the S10 Plus has. As far as the display quality goes, it's actually pretty interesting here. So on the S10 Plus, we have a 6.4 inch display, so it's a lot smaller than the 6.7 inch on the A56. It's a dynamic AMOLED display, HDR10 Plus. It's actually 1440p resolution with 522 for the PPI. So it is a sharper and higher resolution display. And the only drawback, or the thing that is going to be a really big upgrade on the A56, is the 120 hertz. But yeah, the S10 does, actually have a slightly better panel here. The A56 is using the older panel, the Super AMOLED panel. It's 120 hertz though, and it also gets much brighter at 1900 nits peak brightness, so it's a lot easier to see outdoors. It's 1080p 385 for the PPI. And yeah, guys, I think that this is an upgrade for sure because you have 120 hertz and it's a lot brighter. But the S10 display is still very, very nice, guys. Yeah, it's very sharp, and you can kind of like notice it a little bit when you're looking at 1440p content for sure. But yeah, guys, I think that it's a solid upgrade in some areas and actually kind of a downgrade in other areas. Upgrade here is obviously going to be the improved processor and the longer software support. We know the S10 Plus has very old software, and it does still like download and update apps and stuff. It's just it's outdated, right? So the A56, it is the Exynos 1580, 128 gigs, 8 gigs of RAM. You have the Snapdragon 855, which actually is still a very good processor here. And it's 128 gigs and 6 gigs of RAM, I believe, on this version here. Oh no, this is a 8 gigs of RAM. So basically, you get the One UI 7, the new refresh and all that stuff. The A56 does have some Galaxy or AI features. Not a lot. They call it intelligent features. It has a few like object eraser, AI select, read aloud, and stuff like that. The best face. As far as speed goes, the A56 should feel a lot snappier and should get into applications a lot quicker. So it should just be in general, a lot faster. Okay. The S10 is still, very smooth. It's not like it's lagging all over the place. Okay. Google Earth. S10 actually beat it there, or we had a random like glitch with the A56. Not sure why that happened. Okay, as you guys can see, general performance here in terms of like app opening is not that much better. This was like randomly crashing apps today. Not sure why. But like I said, guys, in general, you'll notice the 120 hertz is making everything look a lot smoother. And I think the overall experience is going to be, a little bit, noticeable for sure. But yeah, the gap in between, like, getting into applications is really not as big as you would think. The S10 is still surprisingly running, extremely well here. It's able to keep up. Pretty sure in applications like this, you'll see it kind of freeze a little bit. No, it's still pretty smooth. Yeah, I'm actually impressed. I was expecting it to start, just glitching a little bit, being an older phone. So I think for general use, to me, it's really the 120 hertz that is making the device feel a lot smoother, and little, like, sometimes you have little animation hiccups like that. But yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed with the S10 here. As far as gaming performance goes, of course you will get slightly better performance on here, but because this Exynos processor is not as well optimized, I would say if you're a heavier, gamer, I don't think there's going to be a much of an upgrade here. You might notice that it might not heat up as much on the A56, but they're playing at the exact same settings, and the A55 chip is still running this PUBG at 60 frames pretty, smoothly for the most part. So I would say this is in an instant where you would have to go with the older flagship to get that 120 frames, like S23 Plus or something like that, because you just won't be able to play competitively at 60. But yeah, so as far as performance, both of these phones do a good job. I don't have a big issue with these. If you want to just knock out a few matches, Call of Duty, PUBG, they both actually still do a very good. Let's check out these speakers at max volume. So the A56 is louder, but it lacks in just overall quality. The S10 sounds a lot better, but the S10 is a little bit flatter on the bass. Yeah, so I still would take the S10 Plus speakers. It just sounds a lot cleaner and a lot more higher quality. So, the speaker upgrade here is kind of, it's okay. It's just louder, but it doesn't sound as clean. Also, one thing that you kind of will lose if you make this upgrade is you actually will lose Samsung desktop support. That is not going to be here on the A56. So just do note that. Also, the fingerprint scanner on the S10, it's the ultrasonic, so it's faster. The A56 though it's not bad at all. It's an optical one, but it's just like slightly slower. But I don't really think at this point most people notice it, because if you lightly tap this one, you kind of gotta hold it. But it's not something that most people will really notice. Talk about cameras, because this is pretty much what it comes down to. I feel like if you're coming from an older flagship like this and the image quality is not that impressive, then you probably don't need to upgrade. You probably need to upgrade to something else. So we have a 50 megapixel standard on the A56, 12 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, 4K 30, 12 megapixel selfie, also shoots in 4K 30. The S10 Plus has a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, and then you also do have a 60 megapixel ultra wide, so that telephoto is 2 times. You will be losing that on the A56 here, and you do have 4K 60, 10 megapixel selfie cam, and then you also have an 8 megapixel wide up here. That's why you have the dual cutout, and then that shoots in 4K 60 as well. All right, guys. In conclusion, talking about the battery life is also a very nice upgrade here. The A56 battery life is a lot better. And of course, if you've been holding on to your S10 Plus, it's gonna have some battery degrade. But even with the battery degrade, the A56 just has much better standby time, just much better battery life, just in general. This is mostly due to the bigger battery, 5,000 milliamps versus 4,100 milliamps. You also are gonna have a better charging speeds at 45 watts. Now, you will lose the wireless charging on the S10 Plus if you go with the A56. So there's no wireless or reverse wireless charging, but you get faster charging, 15 watts versus 45 watts. So overall, I think this is a decent upgrade. There's a lot of upgrades here and also some downgrades. The S10 Plus, you also have SD card support and a headphone jack at the bottom, so you will of course be losing that. And yeah.